Welcome back to the workshop, Richard Woodworking. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I recently went to Tennessee and I bought some Purple Heart. Purple Heart wood. I have never worked with Purple Heart before, but I wanted to use it in building Puzzle Cabinet 3. Puzzle Cabinet 3 will be sort of in this form. It is different from the puzzle boxes, which are smaller. If you've seen some of those videos, puzzle box 1, 2, and 3, that's a much smaller mechanical puzzle type thing. This is going to be more like the apothecary or the tea chest. And I'm hoping it will also be sequential discovery. Some of the puzzles, so my puzzle cabinets, if you have seen some of my other videos, I build because I like to build puzzles, but I also like to use it to store some of the mechanical puzzles that I've bought. And so this one will feature the Barrels Cooper, which actually is a little too large for the apothecary, so that's one of the reasons for making this. Inside 3 maze box, one of those. I also have Supernova, which is a hedgehog style puzzle, and Phantom. Both of these are from Puzzle Master of Canada. This is a 3D printed that I purchased from Puzzle Master of Canada, and that's just a maze box. I'm still working out how I'm going to do it, but it will be based on the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. Of course, there's another Parthenon in Greece, but this is based on the one in Tennessee, which is, of course, a scale replica, exact scale replica of the original. Now, mine will not be an exact scale replica in any sort of form or fashion. I'm using the wood that I have at the dimensions I can use, but you will see columns, and it will look somewhat similar to the one in Nashville. So we'll see how it goes. So the Purple Heart is, as I said, it's a very hard wood to work with. It took me several days just to saw one piece. So what we're going to talk about here is some of the workplace or workshop jigs and helps that I use in the shop to kind of help me with my woodworking. Again, most of my woodworking is hand tool only, but I do also use power tools occasionally and power machines. I just don't want power machines in here in the garage because I occasionally do want to actually park my cars inside. So we'll look at some of the different jigs and helps and hold downs and things like that that I use for my woodworking. And I will say that most of these items I did not design or create myself, but some I did. So where I can, I will give credit to where I found them, or I'll note that I made them myself. A lot of jigs and helps are kind of universal, but some are specific to each project. And there's certainly going to be some jigs that I'll be making just for this project, just for working with this kind of wood, especially for making columns and things like that. So we'll look at that next. Okay, you can see we got the Dutch chest open with the tools out because we're going to demo some of the jigs that we have. One of the most basic jigs out there is the bench hook. They've been using these since the 18th century, if not before that. It's very simple, and I've shown these before, but it's a very simple design. Basically, you have a board with a strip on one end and then a strip on the other end. And the difference is using your face. You don't need to use a face vise. You can do this right on the edge of any table or edge surface, but I just use my face vise because I have it. If I use it in this orientation right here, I can use a saw and put let's see if I have a scrap wheel. We'll just use one of these pieces here. Hold this in and then fit this up. This is not the best, but we'll try to do this anyway. And use it that way. Put it right into the bench. You're pushing in this direction. So if you have a piece of wood or something, you can just hold it and then saw it right here. And it allows you to keep your hand on the piece using the forward piece with a slot on the side. The alternative is to flip it over if you have a piece all the way across. This one also, I don't know if you can tell, also has some miter cuts for doing sideways. This is actually my first bench hook. It has a hole in the middle, so I could do drilling, so I could drill right through without hitting the bench itself. You can see over time that the board or the wood that is right here gets cut off. And in fact, this, where the saw kerf goes through, really gets worn out. And so that is something that you have to be aware of. So I still have it because it still has some uses, but that does happen over time. There's another one. This is the one I'm using currently. It's a little smaller. Still, it has the side for the cut. This one is made of plywood, again with strips of pine. And if you saw the video on the plywood tool totes, that also had a smaller one that was made almost, I think, entirely of plywood, or at least the board was. Additional to that, several years ago when I got started, I made a much larger bench hook. This was supposed to be, see, it has maybe some holes, sets of holes in it. The idea was that you could, well, you still can. The idea being that you can adjust where you put the bench hook. If you want to do it at somewhere here, or if you need to adjust it a little higher. And so that works as well. I do occasionally need to use this thing. I have used it just recently, just the other night, with this, with the Purple Heart, because the Purple Heart is much larger than it would not really work on something like this. It's just not, this is not big enough for this. And so using it on a surface like this is much better for my uses. And so using either the face vise or doing it from the table, pushing into it, and then if I'm sawing or have a plane or something like that, it works very well. When I started in woodworking, I did buy one of these. This is a miter box, a Stanley miter box that I got at a big box store. And it came with a saw. And so this is one of these kind of cheap configurations where you can put your, that probably won't fit in there, but you put your board in here. There are different slots. They'll show you, you have your 90 degree and maybe your 45 degree, and you've got some others. There's another over here, just different options. And they have these hold downs. They're supposed to hold your block of wood in place, but to be honest with you, I've never found these to work. I find that just getting a board, marking it, pencil mark, and then striking through that 2 or 3 times, establishing a knife wall. If you've watched Paul Sellers, you know about the knife wall that starts to cut the grain so that when you apply the saw, you're not going to be dealing with as much tear out and you're going to get a much straighter line. And so I have found for my woodworking that works better than this thing. But if this works for you, that's certainly a tool you can use. This next one, I definitely did not design. This is a workbench holding jig, and I found it in an issue of Woodwork magazine from June 2005, and the article by Michael Cullen. This was something that he had seen or done, and maybe others have done it as well. So what the purpose of this is, for small stock, thin stock, you place the item in here. Now this is, okay, so this is also, these are for things that are maybe too thin to go into a face vise. There's not a lot going on there, and you're going to run out of space. And so this is a piece of plywood, and in fact I have added this piece here so it'll fit into the vise, so it'll hold it in place and I don't have to mess with it. But it's not necessary to it, and his design didn't. I don't think it included that. But what you have is you have 2 blocks of wood, and they are chamfered on the side. And then you have another piece also chamfered, angled on that side. And so as you push a piece through, it'll clamp it in place. And so a little piece of molding here, put that piece in, there. It holds it in place. It's not going anywhere. And so from there, put it in my vise. Get that nice and tight. So I'm working in reverse here, but basically take your, if I was standing on the other side where I'd like to be, and if the blade was out, it would plane. And it would, of course, the force is going in this direction, and so that holds it in very well. And so this has been a very helpful jig for me for several years. Additional to this, I have added just this year or last year, I think it was, a couple extra pieces. So I took the one piece out and add these pieces in. There we go. This is for, if you can see that. So I've got a 1/4 inch piece here, and then I've got that locking piece here, a smaller version of it. This is for very thin pieces of wood that I need to get down to 1/4 inch size. And so some piece will go in here, and eventually when I start hitting this, I stop. The reason I made this or did this was last year when I made the T-chest, I was working on a Kamiko pattern for that sliding panel. If you've seen the T-chest video, you know there's a sliding panel. And remember, this is that was designed by Michael Pekovich. That was not my design. All I did was something in the bottom drawer. And so he has different ways of paring or cutting down those Kamiko pieces, but for the small little window that I was going to make, I didn't want to do that. So I just added these two pieces, and it worked very well for me to get, because I'd put it on one side, do 1/4 inch on one side, flip it over, get that down to 1/4 inch. So I'd have these little pieces. So that worked very well for me.